Hello and welcome to the Product Opscast with Graham Reed and Antonia Landy. Welcome, Antonia. How are you doing this morning?
Very well, thank you, Graham.
Today we are joined by the fabulous Nesrine Changuel, Google, Microsoft, Spotify, and alumni, product expert and author of the brilliant Product Delight, which I've now finally finished reading. Nesrine, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Would you like to just introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. So I'm Nesrine. I'm a product trainer and author, newly author, which is a nice title and weird title to get and get used to. But I spent most of my career building globally used and loved product, as you cited, from the iconic blue Skype that we all have the ringtone still in our mind to the Spotify, of course, and then very recently joined Google, first as a Google Meet product leader, and then to Google Chrome with its dinosaur, of course. Yeah, so that summarized my 15 years as a product leader in a large corporate. And very recently, I would say 18 months ago, I left Google with a mission, very, very clear mission. How can I get delight and emotional connection outside of the luxury tech environment? I mean, calling it luxury tech, because these companies master it very well, but not everyone can do it. So my mission is to help these companies master delight.
Fabulous. And we're gonna talk elements about your career throughout, so which I'll mention in the book as well. And a piece I absolutely love hearing about is some of those delightful moments, those moments that we've kind of all seen as we've been using the various tech where you've been a part of, and really lovely to kind of see, yeah, you're involved in that, and the reasons why that was. So today we are going to talk about product delight, both in terms of the book that you've written, in terms of that title, but also the concept as well. My first reaction, of having just finished the book in the last kind of few days, is that other than it's brilliant, it exposes so much of what the typical product manager I would call a kind of a nice to have. Whereas, and in this day and age, it's anything but nice to have. I mean, it really is a fundamental piece of product management. But many product managers, perhaps those that are, in the earlier part of their career, they are an earlier part of the business journey. I find that a little bit difficult to kind of make that leap or see that and say, how do we get from where I am to where I really want to be? And for product ops, our key audience here, how can product ops enable some of these fantastic approaches to product management and bring some real delight? So, Yasmin, kick us off with, what is product delight? What is the delight model that you have put together?
So maybe the best way to get the real definition is you can think about your favorite product. What's your favorite product? Think for a moment about what is the product that came straight, like the first that came to your mind. And it's definitely not necessarily like the most expensive one or the most like a featured one. It's probably the one that made you feel something good. Like it evoked emotion, positive emotions. It could be like it made you feel cared for, make you feel reassured, you make you feel better version of yourself, could make you feel safe. And that's what we want to achieve when we are building products. We don't want just to build products that are functioning well. Of course, the functional part is essential, but we want to combine the functional part of the product with some emotional need from our users. And we can create emotional connection by combining those two words together. So for me, the essence of delight rely on creating real emotional connection that make users feel cared for, safe, protected, whatever positive emotion we want our users to feel. Similar to I think the best way to think about delight is to think also about your favorite gift. Maybe now we just stepped away from the gift season and think about the very best gift you received in your life. It's not necessarily the most expensive one again, or definitely not the most random one, but I'm pretty sure it's the one that make you feel like, that person knows me. I mean, I feel like, yeah, exactly. That's my taste. That's my preference. That's me. And so when I thought that way, I felt like, what do we create products like random objects and not like gifts? And if we master that mindset, I think we can make stand out and amazingly well crafted products.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think it's very interesting, Graham, in your intro, right? This whole idea of, I think, broadly speaking, I think as an industry, we're aligned, right? Delightful products are the things that make us come back, right? You talk about retaining users, right? That's having and fostering that kind of emotional connection makes it much more likely that you will retain your users. But many of us find ourselves in organizations where the day to day isn't centered around how do we create delightful products so that we make users come back, we make users stick around, and it's much more purely centered around what features are we shipping, which problems are they solving, right? And it's always very interesting. I think in a lot of product management literature and content in general, we always talk about problems to solve. Delight. There is a functional aspect, of course, but
Mhm.
delight doesn't come from a problem to solve. Like when my Apple Watch shows me a nice little sort of image of fireworks and tells me Happy New Year, that doesn't inherently solve a problem for me, right? There wasn't a specific lack of fireworks on my watch that
Mm,
was addressing.
mm.
Nevertheless, every year I get surprised and I get delighted by that tiny little touch, right? That I think makes our software, I think, a little more human as well.
Yeah, I love it because I rarely talk about problem space. And I see that the product
Mm.
community is moving away from the terminology of product space. We talk about opportunity space more often nowadays. Is because not every product exists to solve a problem. Most of the products that we love today exist because they honor needs and they surface or they serve on an opportunity. Like think from Spotify perspective, it was born not from a problem, it was born from an opportunity. So, yeah, I totally agree with that. And when I talk about delight, there are different pillars, of course, that relies on. One of them is exceed expectation, and the other one is anticipating need. And anticipating need is an excellent pillar because if we have to wait until our users telling us exactly what they need from us, you will never get the fireworks on your Apple Watch. Never. But since you know that this is an opportunity that I can connect with my customers on a very positive note and I can give them a little smile, then why not? That foster the emotional connection. So, yeah, I think you get it completely right here.
Is just leaning on to what we both said there about those opportunities rather than kind of problems to solve. Is that a change that we've now had over kind of the past sort of kind of 15, 20 years, whereby you know it, tech is the big boom. There are so many people trying to attack the same spaces, the same opportunities, competitors, that actually now the differentiators between them is how they can delight users in different ways rather than just solving the problem. If it was about solving the problem, someone would have done that and that would have been the end of it. They wouldn't have competitors or many competitors.
Mhm.
There are so many opportunities now to enhance, particularly with AI now kind of revolutionizing once again. Is delight a big key factor in this, in particularly within the B2C side of things, about how we can get more customers because we think a little bit differently. We delight them a little bit more than somebody that is just solving the problem.
So when I started writing about product delight, I was fighting against one of the biggest challenge, which is the misconception behind delight. Like most people see delight, as you exactly said in the beginning, as a nice to have, and they down prioritize it and they go back to their like on fire backlog with plenty of features. And then maybe once in a while they will get like sometimes to work on delight. And that's the worst thing you can do. And I don't blame them. And I think they're trying to do by being the best intention of themselves. The only reason why they do that way is because they are not 100% aware about the benefit they can get by investing and changing their strategy toward delight. And here's the thing, there've been plenty of studies and plenty of research, and I've been even like working on these environments, so I can tell that firsthand, that shows that emotionally connected users are twice more likely to stay longer with your product, twice more likely to buy more products and services from you, and twice more likely to tell the world how great you are. So there are three key metrics that we all all, and the entire audience, I think, with us today agree, and they are all chasing, which are retention, revenue, and referral. All these three could be doubled by investing on emotional connection. Now, if you are aware that if you squeeze in some delight into your roadmap and you also change your way of building features toward emotion, not only function, then you will get to that benefit of doubling these three metrics. And I agree with you that delight is going to be the most effective differentiator, and more particularly nowadays, because speed is not an advantage anymore. We're all having the same speed advantage. We're all having access to these AI tools. However, what will differentiate you is how much you have humanized your product, how much emotions are behind the feature. Do we feel that there are real human behind the product, or are we just using robots and tech and software pieces? And so for me, if I love a product and I feel like I'm protected, I'm heard, I'm seen, I'm valued, it's really, really hard to switch to another product, even if it's cheaper. I don't know you, but like I feel like I'm emotionally connected with that product, and moving to another product feels so bad.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like thinking about how we relate to technology. And this might be a complete tangent, but I'm wondering if this is something that is becoming more and more acute, because I certainly, as a millennial, feel like we've started having emotional connections to things and to tech from a very early age. Like if you think about the Tamagotchi, for example,
I
like
do
that
have one. I
was
still have one.
absolutely. Like if you think about that concept of caring for a little egg with a tiny screen, right, built into it, that kind of made your life a little difficult as well, because it's difficult to keep it alive. But having that emotional connection to this thing and then seeing how that evolved over time, I think certainly, I mean, during the pandemic, Animal Crossing on the Switch was a massive, massive boom, because one of the things that game does extremely well is fostering delight, fostering connection, right? It's all about getting emotionally invested in this game. So it's very interesting for me as, you know, a classic millennial and as someone who's always played games, to see these little touches in our more functional software. Let's say, like, for example, the dinosaur, right?
Yes.
In Google Chrome, or the Swiss railway app. There is a little Easter egg where if you add the same begin and end station, you can also play a little game, right? And finding out about these things through word of mouth and then going to try it out yourself, it's so interesting how much that plays into the choice of technology, the
Yes.
choice of software that you will continue to use for a long time.
Honestly, from my perspective, I believe that the light could be for software, hardware, objects. I mean, it could be everywhere. And our relation with objects and software and product could be different from a person to another. However, there are some like universal emotions that we can try to honor. The perspective here, and I'm very strongly opinionated about, is that if the product is used by a human being, whether B2B, B2C, hardware, software, if the product is used by a human being, then they deserve their emotion to be honored. However, if among our audience here, we have people building product that will be used by robots or AI agent or whatever, maybe they can skip the rest of the of the session. They don't have to, but I'm strongly opinionated, and I'm very convinced that if we're building product for human, we have to pay attention not only to their behavior, not only to their problem, but also pay attention to what do they need to feel. How do we make that experience as positive from an emotional perspective as we can? And there are like different techniques behind that. Like I want to share one first technique. Maybe I believe that this is the best technique. people can take with them today, which is the humanization of the product. So for example, when I worked for Google Meet, we never compared Google Meet to Zoom or to Teams or whatever competitor, because we spoke about competitor earlier. We were never obsessed about features that were added to Teams. However, we were obsessed about how would the experience would be better if we're all sitting in the same room, having this meeting in a room as a human being. And if you start thinking that way, you raises the bar. You're already comparing to the best case scenario. And we're not the only one. The other day I was speaking with the head of product at Dyson, and I felt a bit ashamed saying, like, how the hell am I proud of my vacuum cleaner? Like, it's a vacuum cleaner. I'm super happy about having it. I'm hanging it on the entrance. People are seeing it. I'm proud of having it. And he said something very similar. He said, like, we never compare our vacuum cleaner to our competitors. We compare them to, what if you hire a real person to come and clean your house? How would the experience would be better? They get obsessed about what's missing from the human comparison, and they try to add recommendation. They add like plenty of things and make us connect with that object on an emotional level. So that's the first thing people can start bringing as a reflection. Whatever product you're building today, think about, if my product was a human, I know you have to go back in time now, but if my product was a human, how would the experience would be better? And how can I try to get closer to that experience?
We've talked, and there's a piece that I just want to bring us back, and it was really interesting because I had exactly the same discussion on this piece in the office last week with a colleague of mine. B2B versus B2C in this area. Is there a difference? What I want to do is kind of split that into two answers, because should there be a difference? I think the answer is no. I think there is absolutely delight that we can be bringing to pure B2B. Let's take an insurance management system that's internal for a business or something like that. I mean, probably very boring. And I've probably just alienated a whole bunch of users and audience, and apologies for that. Should it be different? No. Is it different in reality? Is it different where we've got product managers that are very, very focused on highly technical, highly functional pieces to get done to enable, new things to happen? Is providing delight ultimately going to be as high a priority versus much more B2C type products?
Okay. Is it different? Yes. Should it be different? Yes. Do they all need delight? Yes. So I'm coming to the answer now. The reason why they need to be different is because the set of emotion that we are trying to achieve is not the same for B2B product versus B2C product. Let's think from a Netflix perspective, Airbnb perspective, Spotify perspective. The set of emotion you are trying to achieve among your users is not exactly the same set of emotion you want to achieve by building Miro or Atlassian or whatever B2B product. Do they have or do need to have emotion honored? Yes. So I think what people need to differentiate is that there are a set of emotions that we want to satisfy. The thing is that they are not the same. And our role as product builders or our role as product managers is to identify those, what I call emotional motivators. So when we use a product, we have some functional motivators, like I want to send an SMS, I want to send an email, I want to listen to music, I want to book a flight. These are functional motivators. But there are also what we call emotional motivators. When I go to Spotify, I want to feel less lonely. I want to feel maybe excited. I want to feel connected. I mean, there is a set of emotions here as a Spotify user. And it's exactly the same. Like if I take just as a random example, Miro, as a Miro user, I want to feel like as a better leader. I want to feel confidence. I want to feel like a better facilitator, etc., etc. And it's important to identify those motivators as the very, very first step of the delight model. I know we're getting into the delight model, but the very first step as we're getting there as product builder is to identify both the functional motivators, and we're all great into identifying functional motivators, but also the emotional motivators. Why? Because when we craft an experience, we want to make sure that whatever solution we are building, the solution is honoring for both. It is aligned with both. And that's what I call usually the deep delight. The deep delight is when the solution is honoring for both an emotional motivators and a functional motivator.
It's interesting because this almost sounds a little bit like jobs to be done for me, or it reminds me of that concept, right? Like ultimately, I think our deeper need is in a business setting to feel competent or feel confident or feel confidence in the internal product.
Yes.
right? That it allows us to do our job correctly, to do our job in the best possible way. And I think there is so much we can learn in the product ops space from not only looking at how might we enable product managers to go after these opportunities, but how can we build a organization in which people feel confident, competent? What systems, what tools do these people need to do their best work? So I feel like there's quite a lot of parallels.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way how I wrote about product delight as a framework is I was obsessed about not coming up with a new ways of working. I know that there are plenty of frameworks, and I was like, no, not another framework, not another, like, I don't want people to feel like they have to change their ways of working. So I adapted myself to the most common ways of working that people like from a discovery perspective to delivery perspective. I mean, most of the process have to stay. Nothing will change. The only thing that you can change is that how you pay attention to small things. Like when you do users interview, and I highly recommend people to continue doing users interview, is to not only pay attention to the struggles or the problems or the behavior, but also pay attention to the emotional cues, the emotional element throughout the interview. I want to share a very concrete example here is when I worked for Google Chrome, I had to work on one of the biggest challenge of Google Chrome, which is tab management. And I've been working as a PM for Chrome iOS. So we know from data that a lot of our users do have hundreds of tabs open. And when I say hundreds, I'm a nice person because it can go to thousands of tabs open. And people leave tabs open for different reasons. Like some, for the most organized ones, they might leave tabs open as to-dos or as reminders or whatever reasons come to your mind. But also a lot of people, like maybe my dad is that kind of persona, would leave tabs open forever. So they will just keep opening tabs and tabs and tabs. And so we had to address this as a technical problem. Like the beginning of the reflection came as a technical problem. It's like, we don't want users to have thousands of tabs open. That takes memory, that takes space, that slows performance. It's not ideal, right? But instead of jumping into a functional solution, like how can I maybe compress thumbnails or whatever technical idea might come to my mind, I had to sit with plenty of users, actual users who's having like many tabs opens, and I tried to understand how they navigate through their tabs, why they do things, what's their relationship with their tabs, etc. So we did a lot of users interview. And of course, we asked them to navigate through their tabs and show us how they do that on their tab grades. I didn't only pay attention to how they did that, but a lot of my attention was directed to moment of frustration, moment of feeling lost, moments of shame. It's funny because a lot of people felt ashamed during the interview, not for the content of the tab, but for like some people had to say something like, sorry, I usually don't have so many tabs opens or something like that. I was like, okay, it's not the point here. But it was a very interesting insight because I realized that a lot of people feel about themselves like they are an organized person or they are not having the best feeling about themselves. And that's not what we want to value. We want to make sure that even if we try to fake it, make sure that people feel good about themselves, feel good while using the products. So it could be even the number of tabs that you show toward the tab grade. Maybe you can show a lower number. That by itself can help them feel better about themselves. So the reason why I'm sharing this story is because most people, when they do users interview, they pay attention to the behavior, to the challenge, but they don't necessarily take notes of those moments of negative emotions because these are exactly the moments that you need to solve for.
Super interesting. This leads on to a point. I've literally just written this down as you were talking because it's quite pertinent. How do, whether it's product ops or not, but it's probably more a message for product leaders actually, is how do you enable, or how do we enable product managers to prioritize elements of delight over and above? Because if we're looking at, take a typical product manager right now in a typical business, they are very, very focused on functional and delivery and getting shit out the door every 5 minutes. How can they turn this around? What's a practical step to kind of justifying this to leadership, to business leadership, to the sales leadership that are saying we need this feature, that we need to be keeping up with the competitors because they've got features we haven't got. What are some practical steps that our audience can kind of take, to say, no, actually, we should be looking at delight more than we are at
Yeah.
the moment?
So I had the luxury to work on companies that do value this concept by itself. And when I say I had the luxury, is because I've been living it from the inside and I've seen how much leaders care. When leaders care, you can see that everywhere. You can see that in their messages. You can see that in their slide deck, and you can even see that in the pillars and the product strategy document as well. Like, for example, in our product strategy document, we had a pillar called Delight. And it's a kind of reminders for everyone in the team to think from, like, every time you're thinking about solution or an opportunity, to reflect, is that going to be delightful or not enough? And when I left Google, I started interviewing a couple of product directors from complete different industries. Interviewed people from Dropbox, from Snowflake, from Amazon, and I tried to see, like, what's their habit, because I'd never been in these companies and I perceive them as successful. And I realized that they have something similar. For example, for Cupcake, they have a product pillar called, for Snowflake, they have a product pillar called Cupcake. And it made me smile. And he said exactly that's what we want to get out of that pillar, is to have a smile on our user's face. And so for Snowflake, they said something similar. They had a pillar called superhero. And so I said, what's this superhero? And he said, it's about allowing our users to feel like superheroes about themselves. So you see, delight is a culture. It's a culture. It has to be in all documents. It has to be in our ways of working. It has to be in our operational ways. Now, the question is, if my company is not there yet, nobody cares, nobody is aware, how can I embrace that? How do I surface that? I know it's hard. I know it's really tough to come and say, hey, Nesrine is an advocate for delight. She's saying that this is going to change our direction. Let's all change things from tomorrow. So I was aware and I was obsessed about how can I make that simple? That's why you don't have actually to get buy-in. I know people will hate me now, but you don't have to get buy-in to start thinking from an emotional perspective. Like, come on, please disagree with me if I'm saying you will continue doing discovery, but instead of only taking notes of behavior, you also take notes of emotions. And so once you've done that, tomorrow when you're sitting with your engineers and brainstorming on ideas, you just have to ask the question, is that aligned with my users' emotional motivators? Do you need leaders' approval for that? I don't know.
So I love the point you're making. Absolutely. I think starting to think more about product delight is really a guiding principle, right? Rather than a specific framework or a change in ways of working. And it's so interesting, Graham, right? At the very beginning, you mentioned nice to have. I remember viscerally and vividly when all of our work was dismissed as a nice to have. Product ops was a nice to have. We're in times of crisis. We're in times of war. We can't afford such things, right? But I think part of it also comes down to making the business case, right? Making the case for the bottom line. Like exactly as you said, Nesrine, engaged users stay longer. They tell others, right? That is the bottom line. There is absolutely a business case to be had behind this that makes your product more financially viable at the end of the day. And it's not just thinking about all of these fluffy emotions and, like adding in little games or little funny touches and all of that stuff. It is connecting with humans. And at the end of the day, product management is all about building for other humans.
Yes. I think that what makes it nice to have is a misunderstanding of what it is. And there's something that we missed talking about today, which are the different type of delight. There is what I call the surface delight. The surface delight can be illustrated perfectly with your example, Antonia, like this pop-up on the Apple Watch. Why not? I mean, it made you smile and there's a curiosity triggered, etc. But that's one category. It's the surface delight. It's when it's only emotional. There's no function, nothing from a functional perspective connected to it. And there's the second type of delight, which is the deep delight. And the deep delight is when you're serving functionality. I'm here for the functional reason, but I'm doing it in a way that aligns with the emotion. Like, think from Gmail perspective, when you send an email and you forget the attachment while saying in your text that you have an attachment, and you get a pop-up saying, I think it's better checking. Otherwise, you will look stupid later on saying that I forgot my attachment. This is a way to make you feel better while using the product, feel
Do you
better
know what?
about yourself.
I remember when that was a labs feature only. And I switched it on. I was like, oh my word, how can this not be a full on everybody needs it feature?
Yeah. So I'm more as an advocate for deep delight, and deep delight is really, really the driver for business success, for users' love, and for differentiation.
A couple of pieces just to circle back on what we said there. There was a very deliberate reason why I used the term right at the very start of this episode, nice to have, because I've read the book, every single chapter, and if audience have not read the book, each chapter dives into a different area, a different principle of product delight, as you put it, Nesrine. And every single one of those, and to circle back to what you said as well, in the book, you are not creating new frameworks. I think there's only kind of one in there that kind of you've come up with, but many of them are existing frameworks. Many of them we are already using, or in some way, shape, or form we're already using in our business. So, absolutely, this book is not saying you need to go and kind of revolutionize how you're working. It's actually applying, that emotional connectivity and an emotional thinking to so much of what you're already doing. These are not nice to haves. They could be seen as nice to haves in a world whereby it is all about just delivery, delivery, delivery. It is not. It is absolutely about, this new way of thinking about getting that emotional connectivity. And to come back to then what we've said there about making that case, I absolutely agree with you, Antonia, that I think what many businesses will be in the position of is not really having thought too much about this. They have been so deep into delivery, functionality, getting it out the door, making money, particularly I suspect in organizations that are now at the middle or later stage of their scale up journey, that they have now established product market fit. They have now established their customer base. They have now established their reputation. Now, how do we solidify that? And this is absolutely, it's one of the good, or going to be one of those key differentiators moving forwards.
I just want to add a point here because I think it can clarify also the why behind the book, because I think our design community are lucky enough to find plenty of material when it comes to emotional design. There are great books, by the way. One of them is called Emotional Design. The other one is Designing for Emotion. I mean, we all know, and there've been like a recent study that the best design is the expressive design, etc. So there is no doubt there. When it comes to marketers, same. The best marketing campaign and the best ads are the emotional ads. Coca-Cola are doing it great. Google are doing it great. But here's the thing. You get product managers and you get engineers and you have business people in the middle saying we don't care, or we don't even know what they are talking about. And you know what? We lose the goal. We lose the focus. We are not aligned. We're not talking the same language. We're not talking the same vocabulary. We are not targeting the same goal. And so one of the reasons why I took this mission of writing the book is to help people get the same vocabulary, align designers, marketers, business people, product managers, engineers toward that goal of creating emotional connection and make people care. All people have to care because that's how we can achieve it.
I love that. Going back to how this looks in the day-to-day, what can we in product operations do to sort of help foster systems that maybe prompt our PMs or maybe even prompt our product leaders to start think about emotional connection and product delight in a day-to-day?
I think the first one is what we just spoke about recently, which is identifying the emotional element and the emotional motivators behind every feature and every product. That's the fundamental. If we are not knowing what people want to feel, we will not get that gift effect. Remember the gift story? We will feel like random products and that won't create the emotional connection. So maybe from an ops perspective, have like guideline, have templates that show like, are we filling in the emotional motivators or do we only look at functional motivators? Just to illustrate the story, when I joined Google Meet, the very first thing I did, And it was COVID, by the way. I joined Google Meet right when COVID hit the world. Like there's no better time to join Google Meet. And while everyone was obsessed about like the scale and making sure that it works, etc., as a product leader for 3 first months, I was only focusing on identifying the emotional impact of this new behavior, meaning that the emotional impact of moving from having meeting in offices to 100% remote. So we collected a lot of like people feeling bored from back-to-back meetings, feeling unseen, feeling low interaction. The Zoom fatigue concept as well came during that time. So it's really important to identify those emotional elements in order to craft and identify opportunities later on as those motivators being the starting point. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing that comes to my mind that could be very helpful for teams is to have what I call quota or like guideline recommendations. So when I worked for Spotify, we had quota for our roadmap. What I mean by quota is like, is your backlog only feature like a functional features, or do you have some slack for emotional features? And so inspired by that, I came into this recommendation of 50-40-10 guideline. So the 50-40-10 is a guideline to help people look at their roadmap and say, ideally, I want 50% of my roadmap to be functional. Yes, purely functional. If I take Spotify as an example, the skip button is a functional feature. There is no doubt. It has to be there. 50% functional. Ideally, 40% deep delight. 40% deep delight meaning that it's functional, but it's aligned with our emotions. So you see, it's 90% functional. Are you going to argue that we will not do that? It's hard. And then why not 10%? Yes, 10% for that surface delight, those moments of smile, those moments that we create the brand and the personality and the love that we will make our user feel. So that's the 50-40-10 guideline. Could be something that could help people have something visual and at least look every quarter to the roadmap. Is it purely functional? How can I maybe improve it to align with the emotional aspects as well?
So interesting. I wonder, this kind of makes me think about, how we center our work around outcomes. But even thinking about the outcomes we generally tend to shoot for, we usually say something like, we want to enable our users to do this, right? Or to get to this end goal. And I wonder, what the world might look like if instead we started thinking about outcomes in we would like our users to feel this
Yes.
and this, right? We would
Yes.
like our users to feel competent when they do their taxes, for example.
We did that for Google Meet, for example. We wrote a product opportunity statement as how might we make people feel more connected and more seen, because there is this feeling of being unseen and less connected, etc. That's a product opportunity by itself, but it's only crafted and like written in an emotional element.
I want to just completely go off track just ever so slightly. And because I have a very interesting question about kind of your time at Google Meet. When you said you joined right at the start of the pandemic, how quickly did you, Google, pick up on the importance that Meet was going to have from the time whenever kind of pandemic really hit to the time that Google went, this is going to be really, really big. We need to really double down and focus on not only the product and the functional elements of Meet, but also how do we make sure that people, as you said, they don't get the fatigue on meetings because you probably used it a lot more than they would have been before. How quickly did that kind of turn around at Google?
I think it was one of my best period of my product career, honestly, because it was a moment where we had all options available to innovate. We were given a very broad strategy, make sure that Google Meet is delightful, is easy to use, it's scalable, etc. But we were given all the freedom to innovate in a way that aligns with, of course, users' motivators. So, of course, I remember it was the time when we introduced background replace. It was the time when we introduced like noise cancellation. Why? Because there was a new need and a new opportunity to protect privacy and to to have this as a feature made a full sense, of course. But also the fact that we were obsessed about not downgrading the experience compared to having like the office experience made us always feel from a human perspective and innovate from a human perspective. We, for example, introduced the emoji reactions. We introduced the hand raise. I know it feels like it's there forever, but it was born during that time. And we were able to ship very quickly because there was need and there was like very clear usage and adoption, immediate adoption. And it was a good way to measure whether there is a success or not. So it's a very special period of a product career that allows you to innovate, but also we made mistakes, of course, and we innovate and we corrected mistakes. I remember when we first introduced background replace, we introduced static image and it was a huge success. And then we added like video background, and the video background was not a huge success because it's distractive. I mean, if I'm looking at you and at the same time having people dancing behind you, I mean, it's not ideal. So we moved from video background to immersive background, and immersive background had a massive success because, you know, like a snowflake falling slowly and suddenly, like it feels more real, really realistic. So we not only added features, but we innovated on features to create that surprise, that continuous surprise and that delight to our users. So honestly, I'm getting emotional now talking about that period because from a product perspective and product career perspective, it's a period where we were giving a clear strategy, we're giving a clear vision, and we are let go to innovate in a very open way.
You talk about that a lot, that period, but also your time at Google Meet and all the features you just talked about quite a lot in your book is incredibly interesting to read about. And I think that for us who lived through that period and worked through that period as well, I think it's incredibly interesting. One of the things I'd like to just kind of touch upon, and Tony, you touched upon this as well, is building product delight, or building delight, I should say, in product operations. Because as I was reading this book, particularly over kind of the Christmas period, something that really struck with me, because so much of what we do in product ops is tied to emotion, is tied to behaviors, is tied to how people work and how can we bring more delight to their day. Our colleagues internally, as people have always said, you know, we product managers and things like that. So actually, what can we be doing, or what can product ops people in the audience be doing to think a little bit more about emotion and delight of their peers and their colleagues that they're working with?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I was not expecting. I think it's really, really good to think that way because you're reminding me about a time I was giving a workshop. So nowadays, I'm also teaching product delight as a method for organizations, and I was giving a full day workshop here in France for a large company for 70 PMs, and we spent a full day talking delight, thinking delight, and even building delight. Toward the end of the day, there would be like a competition, or I mean, it's a nice competition, but we get like a winner for the most delightful features, etc. It was a very fun time. And I was talking about delight as an advantage from a business perspective, of course, like differentiation, retention, revenues, etc. And I remember there was a product director that came to me toward the end of the day. Her name is Susanna. She said like, hey, Nesrine, you've shared so many advantages for building delight from a customer, but also from a business perspective. But there is one thing that you didn't mention at all. I was like, okay, what did I forgot about? And she said, you know, I never seen my product teams so motivated as they are today. Like they are extremely motivated building delight. They are sharing ideas. They are proud of these ideas. And she said, like, I also feel like these ideas have been in their mind for years, but they didn't dare really sharing them. And so she said, like, that's by itself is an advantage because, of course, as I said earlier, delight is a strategy. It's a culture, and you need to foster this culture slowly but safely, and it takes time. So caring about your employees' emotion is extremely important because that will reflect, of course, in the way how the product is built. So I think from like at least I agree on the concept. I agree on the mission. It's really important. And I think the communication is the best. If I want to answer this question, the best way to answer it is to think again from the gift perspective. I know I use the gift example plenty of times, but you need to know the person you're giving the gift to the best. If you talk so many times with the person or the partner or whoever you're giving the gift to, you know exactly what that person value, what that person hates and then try to align. And it's exactly the same, whether they are users, they are colleagues, they are partners. That's exactly the same. Know what they value, know what they hate, know what makes sense for them.
Yeah. And I think if I could add to that, Graham, something that I often find myself thinking about is, to me, there's a very, very clear link between innovation and good products in general and creativity. I actually think the product management job is an incredibly creative one, but you need space, specifically mind space for that creativity. So taking everything we've learned from Nesrine today into account, we might start thinking about, how can I foster an environment where people do feel creative, right? And what are the prerequisites to that creativity? Because you're not going to feel creative in an incredibly stressful environment, or in an environment where you feel unsafe, where there is cutthroat competition all around you. Might work for some, right? But if we're thinking of these emotional guidelines, right, as our guiding light, our North Star, let's build a company where creativity is easy. And what might that look like? I think that might also help us in product ops to build solutions in a way that also takes emotion into account.
Yep.
I agree. And one of the things I think, and you started to touch on this, Nesrine, just in the piece that you were talking about, and you absolutely cover this in the book as well, about delight is different for different people. So actually, I know you talk about examples whereby you've built. I think it was on backgrounds, and you've done one for certain things like religious holidays, for example. And actually, while that is great for certain people, for others they can feel very disconnected. They can even feel intimidated. They can feel very different emotions than maybe what all of us intended to deliver there. So again, it's absolutely, as Antonia said, understanding and having that space to understand your audience, and what the positive and negative ramifications that could be from what you're designing, what you're delivering.
Yeah, there's a point that I was highlighting in the book that for me was extremely important, is inclusiveness. Because when we are building for emotion, what makes me happy is not necessarily what makes you happy. And even myself, I might be happy with something that will not have any effect on me, maybe in a month or so. So being inclusive with emotion is really hard. It's even harder than being inclusive with function, by the way. And so there's a very fundamental question that you have to ask yourself, is like, is this feature causing any harm to anyone, by the way? And make sure that if there's one person, one persona, 1% or whatever could be impacted negatively, maybe you cannot ship it. And the best example I can share for this is a real example, unfortunately, that happened to France by a company called Deliveroo. And so what the Deliveroo did last year, it was a good intention, honestly. It was Mother's Day. And so they sent a notification on the user's phone, and the notification looked exactly like missed call from your mom. I mean, if you see the design, it's impressive. Like, it looks like missed call from your mom from a design perspective. You press on it, and then it says, it's Mother's Day. Think about sending flower to your mom, and Deliveroo can do that for you. Why not, right? I mean, the way how I'm sharing it, why not? But that feature had the worst press coverage ever because it's not inclusive. Not everyone felt the joy. Some people felt awkwardness. Some other felt the grief, the sadness, whatever. Not everyone has the luxury of that, receiving that message. And of course, Deliveroo recognized it was an error. They apologized. Things happen, but maybe they could have avoided that by thinking more in a more inclusive way.
And it's unfortunate to be ending our time on this episode with a slightly somber but incredibly important and conscious note to think about there. We are out of time today. Nesrine, thank you so much for joining us today. Your real passion for this as an area of product management is very clear, very evident, and absolutely evident in the book as well. And about here, we'll make sure we put a link to the book for anybody. And I absolutely fully recommend people go and read this book. It's absolutely brilliant and really a must-have, I think, as we move forward in product management and thinking a lot more about the importance of emotion and delight in how we're building our products. So Nesrine, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I just want to add one quick thing, which is when I was writing about product delight, very close friend to me said, he actually warned me. He said, like, hey, Nesrine, there are two ways of writing books. The first way is like when you're writing about a solution for a known problem. People knows about the problem and you're giving them a solution for that. And there is a second way of writing a book, which is you're giving a solution for an unknown problem. And he said, like, the second one is harder because you have to double down on the effort. You need to first evangelize around the problem, make sure that they understand that there is a challenge, and then offer them the solution. I think you know where I'm heading to. I chose the second one because not everyone is aware that the light is the differentiator. It's the one element that will make their product stand out. So I have a double mission, and you're helping me a lot, of course, in spreading the word. So thank you for being an advocate for product delight. And I'm all here to help. So for people who want to reach out, they can reach out on LinkedIn or through my websites. And I'm happy to help with whatever way to make more delightful products.
Thank you so much. Well, look, that's a great ending to our episode. So, but once again, would like to say special thanks to our guest today, Nesrine Changuel. And for everyone we've shared, do connect with any of us on LinkedIn and do absolutely please check out Nesrine's book as well. That's everything for today. Thank you to everybody watching. Antonia and I will be back on the next episode of the Product Opscast. Thank you, everybody.